Well, I'd like to welcome you all today here. It's fantastic to see such a wonderful turnout. Thanks so much for coming. Before I continue, I just want to acknowledge that we are on Coast Salish territory and Chief Vern Jacks is here. Introduce to you Michael Ignatieff, the leader of the Federal Liberal Party of Canada. Michael is a compassionate, wise man with a great deal of social conscience. And he has worked actively to instill these values in the federal Liberal policies and to ensure they form the foundation of the next government of Canada. Michael and I have been chatting. We've had the opportunity a number of times to chat, and I told Michael that I had a ranch up in the interior and that I love animals, and he and his wife also love animals. As a matter of fact, there are two cats, Mimi and Eric. They got their two cats from a breeder just outside of Victoria. So some of his family actually is from here. So Michael was born in Toronto, and he studied history at the University of Toronto before gaining a doctorate from Harvard. Michael's also taught at the University of British Columbia, at Cambridge, at Harvard, the London School of Economics, and elsewhere. Michael's also earned a number of literary awards, including the Canadian Governor-General's Literary Award for Nonfiction. And so it is with great pleasure that I introduce to you today Michael Ignatieff, and I give Michael a copy of my book, The Climate Connection. The Climate Connection is it was written by me and Robert Reed, and it's really with great pleasure that I introduce to you today Michael Ignatieff, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. One of the things that I want to say about being a Liberal is we believe in teamwork. We believe that I'm not a one-man band. I can't do it without the men and women behind me, and I need somebody else in the House of Commons of Canada, and you know who that is. It's Renee Hetherington. Renee is a scientist, a climate scientist. She's been a business person. She believes in evidence-based politics. You know what that kind of politics is? That's politics that respects facts, that respects statistics, that respects knowledge, that respects wisdom. You know that kind of politics? We seem to have forgotten that kind of politics, but that is the politics we're bringing back to Canada. That's why we're going coast to coast, 10 provinces, 3 territories, 6 events a day, talking to Canadians, bringing them into what I call the big red tent at the center of Canadian politics. There's a big red tent at the center of Canadian politics. And you know who put it there? I'll tell you who put it there. It was Wilfrid Laurier. And when I got on the bus this morning, Ken Dryden passed me a little piece of paper that reminded me of something I didn't know, and maybe you don't know, which is this is the 100th anniversary of Wilfrid Laurier's visit to the South Island, to Victoria. It was Wilfrid Laurier who planted that big red tent at the center of Canadian life. The big red tent that said, welcome immigrants to our country, open the doors to our country, treat refugees with respect instead of treating them like a threat. That is the part of the tradition that Wilfrid Laurier stood for. Wilfrid Laurier stood for the equality between francophones and anglophones. He wanted to bring Canadians together, not push them apart. C'était un grand Québécois qui a fondé la tradition libérale. So we're proud of that. We're proud of the ways in which we pulled our country together in the 100 years since Laurier visited the South Island. And we've always planted the stake right in the center of Canadian politics. We're the party that gave this country the Canada Pension Plan, the national flag. We're the party that gave this country the Charter of Rights and Freedoms so that everybody in this parking lot tonight is equal to everybody else and no one's better than anybody else. That is a liberal insight. That is a liberal vision. That is a liberal value. And it all starts with a great Quebecer who visited here 100 years ago. I also want to acknowledge a friend of mine who was in the House of Commons of Canada and served his country with great distinction and is a personal friend of many of us, and that's Roy Cullen. Roy Cullen, nice to see you here. A couple of minutes ago when I was going through the crowd, and that's an important part of this, is I don't just stand up and talk, and we don't just stand up here. We're talking to the crowd. We're listening. You can't lead in this country unless you listen. It's a key value of liberal politics. The politics of persuasion depends on listening, depends on argument, depends on paying attention to what people say. And about 10 minutes ago, somewhere in the crowd, someone came up to me and said, I got one message for you. She said, I want my country back. Okay? I want my country back. We've got a prime minister who somehow has taken the country away, and this is the summer. This is the summer in which I think Canadians began to feel a deep unease about their country. It started with the prorogation of Parliament in January. People thought, he's prorogued once and he's prorogued twice. He's a man who, when faced with criticism in the Parliament of Canada, shuts Parliament down. And that was the beginning of the tip. And then he was asked to obey a federal court order in respect of a prisoner in Guantanamo Bay, and he ignored a federal court order. And people thought, wait a minute, isn't the Prime Minister supposed to respect and obey the law? And then he had civil servants, public servants, criticizing him, and he began to fire them. First he fired a nuclear regulator. Then there was a man who stood up who was in the Foreign Affairs Department of our government, and who criticized the government about its handling of the Afghan detainees, and he let the dogs off the chain and traduced and betrayed that man's public reputation. That's not the way to treat the public service of Canada. The public service of Canada is there to serve all of us, and part of their job is to tell a prime minister something he doesn't want to hear. And you've got to have a prime minister who's willing to listen to people when they tell him something he doesn't want to hear. That is part of what being a leader is, to listen to the stuff you don't want to hear. And just recently, we had a veterans ombudsman. There may be people in this crowd who've served their country as veterans. And we have a veterans ombudsman to fight for veterans. And this guy stood up and fought for veterans. You know what he got as his reward? He got fired. That's the way the Prime Minister does business. If you criticize him, you get fired. And we have other examples of that. And it goes on and on and on. This inability of this Prime Minister to listen with respect, the inability of this Prime Minister to respect the institutions that keep us free. There is the waste of public money. This summer, we had an unprecedented moment to rebuild Canada's prestige on the international stage, and that was the G8, G20. As a patriotic Canadian, I was looking forward to it. Invite all these world leaders, bring them to Canada, show them Muskoka, be great. What happened? Harper shut Toronto down for 72 hours, built a fake lake, didn't accomplish anything at the G8, G20 except photo opportunities for his political benefit, and charged you $1 billion. That's what happened. This is the kind of thing that has begun to make Canadians feel there's something badly wrong with this picture, and we need better government. And that's why, as we've gone across the country, 10 provinces, 3 territories, more and more people have come to these meetings. The crowds have grown steadily. It's not always been a liberal gathering. There are a lot of people in this crowd possibly tonight who voted for other parties. But they're coming to talk to us and listen to us because they're looking for something better. They feel something's wrong here. They want to change, and they want to be shown a moderate, sensible, evidence-based politics. It's based on argument and persuasion and not manipulation. And why do I say that? Partly because of this census issue. I never imagined in my political life that I would have to stand up on a public platform for 7 weeks and defend the census, for heaven's sake. I mean, how do we get to this place? How do we get to a situation in which a responsible political leader could get up, as the Prime Minister has done, and said, you should be very frightened of the census. They're going to infringe on your personal liberties, and they're probably going to put you in jail. Have you ever heard such nonsense in your whole life? This is ridiculous. You can't govern this country unless you have knowledge, unless you have information, unless you have statistics. And we happen to have had the best statistical service in the damn world. And he's trying to make you frightened of it. He's trying to turn you against an institution of government that served the people very well for generations. And so what we have is a government that says, don't bother me with the facts. Don't bother me with information. Don't tell me about homeless people. Don't tell me about single-parent families. Don't tell me about Aboriginal Canadians who don't have proper education. Don't talk to me about all the things that, all the promises have not been met in Canadian society. I don't want to know. I don't want to know the facts. What I want to give you is my ideology, and I want to, if possible, ram it down your throat. And that's the element of this story that's beginning to make Canadians uneasy and unhappy. And so what happens when we go to these meetings is that conservatives come to these meetings and they say, where is the progressive gone in conservatism? And they ask, where is the accountability in conservatism gone? Where is the compassion gone in conservatism? They are faced with having voted for a party that they no longer recognize. And so what I say to them is, remember Wilfrid Laurier. Come into the big red tent at the center of Canadian life. That's where accountability's gone. That's where progressiveness is gone. That's where compassion is gone. It's gone right where it's always been, in the Liberal Party of Canada. And there are other people who come to our meetings who've been tempted to vote for the Green Party, who voted for the NDP. These are people with a social conscience. These are people deeply worried about the future of the environment, particularly on this superlatively beautiful coast that is the pride of all Canadians and is the joy of everybody fortunate enough to live here, as you are. But the point here is that there are people coming to talk to us who are concerned about the future of the environment. They're concerned about social justice. They want early learning and child care for every Canadian family. They want to make sure that there's a tanker moratorium on the North Coast. They don't want... But they're faced with an uncomfortable political reality. And this is a reality everybody in this audience, more than anywhere else in the country, needs to understand. If you vote for the NDP and you vote for the Green, it'll have one infallible result. You'll get 4 more years of Stephen Harper. And if you vote 4 more years of Stephen Harper, you will get no action on the environment, you will go backwards on the environment, and you will go backwards on every part of the social justice agenda that matters in this country. You will go backwards in terms of helping Aboriginal Canadians close the gap between investment in education for Aboriginal peoples. We will go backwards on protection of our environment. Marine protected areas will go backwards. We will not get child care. So we've got to get real. We've got to get sensible. We've got to talk to the people and make them understand. Come on in to the big red tent at the center of Canadian life. If you want environmental action, and if you want social justice, and if you want responsible, compassionate government. And that is what we're here to do. One of the most fundamental things about Stephen Harper is that he has a view of politics in which he believes that anybody who opposes him is an enemy to be defeated and then, if possible, destroyed. I have a different view of politics. It's deep in my sense of what is right, which is that there are adversaries in Canada. There are adversaries, but there are no enemies in Canada. You have to get this woman in the Parliament of Canada. I need her there.